Hello students, welcome to Academic English. Today we are going to deal with chapter 1 of Hornbill text, The Portrait of a Lady, written by Khushwant Singh. Now Khushwant Singh is a very familiar Indian author, and through the title itself, Khushwant Singh clearly states that he wishes to talk about a lady, and this lady mentioned in the title of the story is none other than his grandmother. Now, portrait means a picture. Now, Khushwant Singh is trying to create a picture in the mind of the reader of his grandmother. So, now the chapter is about Khushwant Singh's grandmother, how she was, and he also beautifully elaborates the strong bond of friendship that he shared with his grandmother and how this relationship or this strong bond of friendship changed over the years. Now we'll move on to the story. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. People said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. So Khushwant Singh, in the beginning of the story itself, gives us a very clear statement regarding the appearance of his grandmother. He says that his grandmother was just like anybody else's grandmother in appearance. She was just an old woman. Okay, so my grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman, and she had been old and wrinkled. What do you mean by wrinkle? Wrinkles are these lines and folds that appear on the face of a person with the advancement in age. Okay, as we advance in age and we become old, these lines or folds will appear all over our face. So those lines or folds are called wrinkles. So he keeps on narrating about his grandmother's appearance. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years I had known her. So my grandmother, she was just like anybody else's grandmother, okay? And she was old and wrinkled also. She used to have wrinkles all over her face. And this was so for the 20 years that I had known her. So he is telling that for the past 20 years, right from childhood, I had been keenly watching or closely observing my grandmother's appearance, and she remained like this, old and wrinkled. She remained as an old and wrinkled lady right from my childhood till 20 years. Okay, so all through these years, there was no change in her appearance whatsoever. People said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. So other people used to tell me that my grandmother used to be young and pretty once. She used to be young once, okay, way back, and pretty also, pretty beautiful also, and had even had a husband. See, others used to tell me that she used to have a husband. She had a husband, okay, and I find it very hard to believe that my grandmother had been young and pretty once, okay, way back. Why? Because all through these 20 years that I had seen my grandmother, there was no change in her appearance whatsoever. So this is what is making Khushwant Singh very hard to believe that his grandmother was young once, pretty once, and once she had a husband also. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban and loose-fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. Now, Kushan Singh is talking about a particular portrait or a picture that was hanging above the mantelpiece. Now, what is a mantelpiece? Mantelpiece, it's a shelf above the fireplace. So, here is a fireplace, and this is the shelf that is above the fireplace, and above this mantelpiece, above this shelf, what do you have? It is Kushan Singh's grandfather's picture that was hanging. Okay, now my grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban. Now this is regarding his appearance, what he was wearing. So he was wearing a turban, okay, big turban. Turban, as we all know, it's a head covering, okay, usually worn by Sikh people, okay, people who belong to Sikh community. Okay, so his grandfather was wearing this particular turban and loose fitting clothes. Loose fitting means it's baggy, it is not fitting tightly to his body. Okay, it was hanging loose on his body. What? The cloth. He wore a big turban and loose fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. So now his grandfather had long white beard. Okay, as you can see here in the picture, he had long white beard which is covering the best part of his chest. See, only half part is seen outside because he had long white beard. Okay, and this long white beard is covering almost half part of his chest, the best part of his chest. Okay, and all together, okay, his dress, loose fitting clothes, his turban, his long white beard, everything together gave the impression that he is at least 100 years old. Okay, so this is what is making Kushan Singh believe that his grandfather must be at least 100 years old, because he had not seen his grandfather in person. He had known his grandfather only through this portrait. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. So this old, okay, very old kind of a person cannot have wife or children. Okay, his age suits to be a grandfather, and that is why Khushwant Singh is telling that I cannot believe that my grandfather could have a wife or children. His age suits of becoming a grandfather. Okay, so he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. That is what he says. Okay, as for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child that seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of prophets she used to tell us. Now, Kushan Singh is telling again that I cannot believe that my grandmother had been young once or beautiful once. Okay, and this thought itself was revolting. This thought itself was so unpleasant that I don't want to even imagine that my grandmother was once young and pretty. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was revolting. Because this thought itself was unpleasant, I didn't want to think about my grandmother being young and pretty. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child. Now, Khushwant Singh's grandmother, she often used to narrate him stories, and he liked to listen to the stories told by his grandmother. What all stories did she tell? She often told us of the games she used to play as a child. So she used to tell him the stories of the games that grandmother as a child used to play. Okay, so these are the childhood stories of grandmother. Okay, so Cushion Singh could not accept this also, found it very hard to accept this also. That seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part. See, absurd means illogical, something that doesn't appeal to your mind, your logic, and undignified, disrespectful. And we treated it like the fables. Fables means a short story conveying a moral in which animals are the main characters. Now, prophet means saint. That seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us. So, now Kushan Singh is telling that grandmother used to tell me or narrate to me the stories of the games that she used to play as a child. Okay, the childhood, uh, the games that she used to play as a child. During the childhood, she used to play certain games, and of which she used to narrate to her grandchild. And this also didn't appeal to Kushan Singh's mind, and he treated it like the fancy stories, okay, so the fables which are not true, okay. So Kushan Singh cannot believe that once his grandmother was a child and she used to play certain games as a child. So he used to listen to these stories, real stories of the games that the grandmother used to play as a child, and treated it like imaginary or fancy stories, okay, fables, and he could not believe that these are real stories. Now, this is regarding her appearance again. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Her face was a criss-cross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her, old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older, and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. Now again, Kushan Singh is telling that my grandmother had been short, okay, she was not tall, she was very short, and fat, okay, she was very fluffy, fat, and slightly bend, okay. So bend means to stoop forward. Why? Because old people will not be having the energy to stand erect, stand straight, okay, or walk straight, so will be bending, they will be bending a bit, stooping a bit forward to balance, okay. She had been short and fat and slightly bent. Her face was a criss-cross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. Now, criss-cross is this particular pattern, as you can see here in this picture also. Okay, this grandmother has criss-cross wrinkles, okay, all over her face. Okay, this pattern you can see here also on her face. So her face was a criss-cross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. That means my grandmother's face had criss-cross wrinkles all over her face. Okay, so it was not pertaining to a single place, okay, on her face. It was all spread all over her face. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. So Kushan Singh is telling, no, I'm sure that all through these years she had remained like this, because I haven't seen any change in her appearance all through these years, and I think that she was like this, okay, for uh, in the past also she was like this, okay, this is what I believe. No, we were certain that she had always been as we had known her, old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older, and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. So Kushan Singh is telling that my grandmother looked so old, so terribly old. So she's very, very old. And I think she cannot advance in her age. Why? Because she is very old, terribly old. She cannot grow older. Why? Because she is extremely old, and she had remained or stayed at the same age. Okay, for all these 20 years that I had known my grandmother. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. She hobbled about the house in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and other telling the beads of her rosary. Now again the narrator keeps on elaborating about the appearance of his grandmother. She could never have been pretty. So pretty here, the narrator is using the words which have similar meanings. She could not have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. So this looks contradictory, but what the author is intending to tell us is that pretty, the word pretty used here, it means the outward appearance, outward beauty, and but she was always beautiful. This particular word indicates the beauty that is within the grandmother, the inner beauty. Okay, so she was beautiful at heart. That is what Kushan Singh is telling. So she was not charming outside, but she was always beautiful inside. Okay, who? Kushan Singh's grandmother. She hobbled. Hobbled means to walk in an awkward way. As I told you before, old people will not be having the energy to walk properly or stand properly, erectly, and all. So she hobbled about in the house. So she was walking in a weird, awkward kind or awkward manner in the house. She hobbled about the house in spotless white. So the grandmother, as she is a widow, she used to wear white dress, okay, and that too was spotless. Spotless means it is very clean, okay, there was no trace of a dirt on her cloth. She hobbled about the house in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop. Just see. So this is the way grandmother used to walk. Okay, so she was bending a bit forward. Okay, she was a bit fat, bending a bit forward. She placed one hand on her back to balance her stoop, to balance herself. Okay, so she used to keep one hand of hers on her back while she walked around, and the other hand she always had her rosary. Just see, her stoop and other telling the beads of her rosary. So rosary, you might all have seen this thing. So you use this to count your prayers. Okay, so grandmother used to keep this rosary of hers always in her hand. And now, whenever the narrator saw his grandmother, she was holding this rosary and walking in this awkward manner, keeping one hand on her waist to balance herself, and the other hand she had this rosary with the help of which she used to count her prayers. So this means that grandmother was a very religious, traditional person. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved inaudible prayer. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. Now, Kushan Singh again keeps on explaining his grandmother's appearance. Her silver locks means the gray hair, the white gray hair that grandmother has, were scattered. Scattered means it is kept in a disorganized way. So it is not properly combed. What? The gray hair that is not properly combed. Untidily. Untidily means it's not neat. Okay, it is very tidy. It is not neat. Over her pale. Why grandmother's face is pale, lacking color, colorless? Why? Because she has advanced in age, because she is very old. There is no color on her face. Okay, and puckered face. Puckered means it is a gathering of wrinkles or small folds. Okay, so you can see here this grandmother has wrinkles and lines all over her face, and her face appears to be kind of weird. Okay, so the shape has been lost, so that is called puckered. Okay, now Her pale, puckered face and her lips constantly moved inaudible prayer. Inaudible means unable to be heard. So you cannot hear the prayers properly. Now, how can you understand that she is praying? She always moves her lips, but the prayers are not heard by anybody else. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. So, Kushan Singh's grandmother's hair, the silver hair, grey hair, were scattered untidily on all over her face. Okay, so she never bothered to tidy them up or comb them up. Okay, so she walked around just like this. Okay, and she was praying all the time also as she moved around in the house. Yes, she was beautiful. So the narrator is telling that my grandmother was indeed beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. So, my grandmother is just like the winter landscape in the mountain. Now, here, with the help of this particular word like, Kushan Singh is comparing his grandmother to the winter landscape in the mountain. Okay, so he is clearly using the literary device simile here. Okay, so comparison with this particular help of this particular word like. So Kushan Singh's grandmother is being compared to the winter landscape in the mountain. Just look at this particular picture. Okay, the winter landscape in the mountainous region. The mountains are covered with snow and the landscape also is covered with white snow. So we will, when we get to watch this particular sight of the winter landscape in the mountain, we'll be filled with a sort of satisfaction and happiness, extreme happiness. So Kushan Singh is telling that I used to get the same satisfaction and happiness of watching the winter landscape in the mountain when I watched my grandmother. Serenity here means calmness, and contentment, it's a state of happiness and satisfaction, being extremely happy and satisfied. So just like how I watched the winter landscape in the mountain which is covered by beautiful snow, I used to get very much satisfied and contented, very much happy. The same sort of feeling I used to get when I saw my grandmother. So this is what Kushan Singh tells about his grandmother. My grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. So Kushan Singh is telling that he and his grandmother were very good friends. So he's talking about the village episode where Kushan Singh and grandmother were living together in the village. And at that particular time, they shared a very strong, thick bond of friendship with each other. Why? Why was Kushan Singh left in the village with grandmother? Because his parents left me with her when they went to live in the city. See, so maybe Kushan Singh's parents went to the city to earn a living. Okay, for this purpose, he was sent to live with his grandmother. So they could maybe they could not afford to take Kushan Singh and grandmother along with them. Okay, for this reason, they left Kushan Singh and grandmother in the village and left for the city. And we were constantly together. We here means Kushan Singh and grandmother. They were constantly together. Okay, they shared a very strong friendship. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. So it was the grandmother who took care of the grandson in every way possible. So she was the one who woke Kushan Singh up and she was the one who got him ready for school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing-song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. I listened because I loved her voice but never bothered to learn it. So Kushan Singh is telling that It was my grandmother who used to take care of me all the time, and she was the one who got me ready for school and did everything that is needed for me in those days. And while she did things, okay, while she got me ready at that time, what did grandmother do? She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing song. So monotonous means dull, okay, it lacks variety, it is kind of boring because it is getting repeated in the same way. Monotonous sing song means to recite something in a sing song manner. That means as if somebody is singing a song, okay, with some tune, but that tune is repeated, okay. So she sings her prayers in the same dull lacking tone, dull tone, and this was not at all interesting for Cushion's sake, okay, but the grandmother hoped something. What was it? While she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. So Cushion Singh is telling that while she bathed me, she used to recite her prayers in a sing-song way because she believed that I would listen to it and generate some interest in learning the songs, okay, and I would learn the song by heart, okay, afterwards. But I listened because I loved her voice. I loved my grandmother singing. I loved my grandmother's voice. That is why I listened to these kinds of sing song prayers, but never bothered to learn it. I didn't have interest in the song at all. This is what Kushan Singh says about the uh, song which is being sung by his grandmother. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen inkpot, and a red pen, tie them all in a bundle, and hand it to me. After a breakfast of a thick, stale chapatti with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. She carried several stale chapattis with her for the village dogs. So now Kushan Singh is tracing out the daily routine of grandmother and grandson when they lived in the city. And Kushan Singh during those days used to go to the school that is situated in this particular village where they were staying. So this is the routine things, daily things that they usually did in those days. Then she would fetch my wooden slate. Fetch means to go and get something. So it was a grandmother who used to fetch everything, or she got everything that is needed for the grandson at school. She was the one who used to get it for him. Okay, what all are the things that she collected for her grandson? My wooden slate, okay, slate, you might know that slate is a thing on which it's a board, kind of a board on which you write, okay, write things. And in those olden days when Kushwant Singh went to the school, children used to carry this particular slate to write, okay, write things. My wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered. Plastered means to cover with a layer of plaster or to polish the surface of the slate. Okay, so she was the one who took care of Kushwan Singh in every way possible. Okay, in those days. And the other thing she collected were a tiny earthen ink pot. Okay, earthen means I have shown the ink pot here, so you can dip a wooden pencil or a feather inside this ink bottle, ink pot, and you can write with the help of that. Okay, so this is the earthen ink pot. Earthen means it is made of clay. Okay, that is why it's called earthen ink pot. And a red pen, okay, tie them up in a bundle and hand it over to me. So in those days they never carried bags with them. They didn't had what, school bags, but instead grandmother used to collect all these things. She used to put it up and bundle it up together, and she handed it over to Kushal Singh. After a breakfast of a thick, stale chapati. Now stale here means it's not fresh. Okay, maybe she had made the chapati on the previous day. Okay, so it is not fresh, it is not freshly prepared, it is stale. Okay, what? The chapati, okay, that they are eating every day. After a breakfast of a thick, it is not soft, it is very thick, stale, it is not fresh, chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it. Okay, they used to spread butter and sugar over the chapatis and they used to gulp it down and they went to school. Okay, after this having this breakfast, she carried several stale chapatis for her with her for the village dogs. So Kushan Singh's grandmother, she always carried some chapatis with her when they went to school. Okay, when she went along with Kushan Singh to school. Why? She would feed the village dogs, the stray dogs. Okay, they'll be always hungry. They will not get proper food. So she showed concern towards animals. Okay, so that is evident from what is being said here. Okay, that she carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dog, so she cared for the dog. This is another character trait of a grandmother. My grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. The priest taught us alphabet and the morning prayer. While the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus, my grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. Now, after having breakfast and after collecting some chapatis for the village dogs, grandmother and the grandson would go out of the house and move towards the school. Okay, so grandmother went along with Kushan Singh to school. Why? Not only because she cared for him to a great deal, but also because of the fact that the school was attached to the temple. Okay, so uh, I told you that Kushan Singh's grandmother was a very religious person, and that is why she loved going with Kushan Singh to school. Why? Because she can spend some time in the temple while Kushan Singh sits and learns at school. The priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer. So it's a very different kind of schooling that we could see here, that Kushan Singh is having in the village school, because the priest was the teacher and the priest used to teach the students, the children, alphabet. That means the Desi alphabet and the morning prayer. Okay, so these are the things that are taught in the village school, and grandmother was really very happy with the schooling that her grandson is getting. While the children sat in rows on either sides of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus. Chorus here means it's a group of people who say the same thing at the same time. So we could say, there are certain songs in which in between chorus is heard. Okay, so a group of people will sing aloud. Okay, in between. So that is called chorus. Okay, so while Kushan Singh and the other children sat in the veranda singing the alphabet, in the veranda of the school, singing the alphabet or the prayer all together, his grandmother, what did she do? My grandmother sat inside. Inside here means she sat inside the temple reading the scriptures. She used to read holy books inside the temple. So she was very happy and delighted to do this because she loved reading the scriptures and spending her time in prayers. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. So uh, after finishing my studies at school, okay, Kushan Singh studies at school, and after the grandmother had finished reading the scriptures or the holy books, they would walk back home together. Okay, this is what Kushan Singh tells us about his schooling. And then This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting to each other for the chapattis we threw to them. So after they have done with the schooling, and after grandmother had finished reading the scriptures, now they would walk back home together. And at this particular time, who would come after them? It is the village dogs. Okay, so they start following grandmother and grandson from the temple door to their home. Why? They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. Okay, we saw that the stray dogs, we know that the stray dogs will be very hungry because they will not be having anything to fill their stomach. Okay, so at this time they knew that grandmother and grandson would come. So this is a routine thing that went on for so many days or so many years, and these stray dogs knew it very well that grandmother and grandson would come after school and school time, and they would be waiting at the village temple door, and grandmother would throw these stale chapatis to these stray dogs, and they'll be fighting with each other for this chapati, that the bits of chapatis that they get. And they would even follow grandmother and grandson to uh, their home. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. That was a turning point in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. There were no dogs in the streets, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. Now, this is another episode in Cushion Singh's and grandmother's life. When Cushion Singh's parents had money enough to bring Cushion Singh and grandmother to the city, okay, to their city home. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. They sent for us means they called us, or they took us from the village to the city. Okay, that was a turning point in our friendship. Now it is very important. What was the turning point in Cushion Singh's and grandmother's friendship? So when they went to the city, it marked as a turning point in their friendship. Why is it so? Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. Now, even though they were sharing the same room, who? Cushion Singh and his grandmother were sharing the same room, they had a common room, but grandmother could not accompany her grandson to the school. Why? Because I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. Now, Kushan Singh used to go to an English school, okay, and that too in a motor bus, in a bus, okay. So, grandmother could not accompany him, okay, to the school. Why? Because he was going in a bus, and now the school was not attached to the temple also, so now grandmother could not accompany her grandson to the school. There were no dogs in the streets, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of a city house. Now courtyard means it is an unroofed area that is completely or partially enclosed by walls. So there are no roofs here. Okay, so it is an open area. We call it the veranda. Now, there were no dogs in the streets of the city, and so grandmother, she wanted something, she wanted to do something. Okay, she wanted to show her care to somebody. Okay, some animals or birds. So for this purpose, she started feeding the sparrows, the birds which came to the courtyard of the new city house. Okay, so this was a pastime activity of grandmother, and she used to be very happy doing it. That means feeding the sparrows. As years rolled by, we saw less of each other. For some time she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes Principle, the world being round, etc. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. So, after some years have rolled by, okay, as years rolled by means as time passed by, okay, as years passed by. So, what happened as years passed by? We saw less of each other. I and my grandmother saw very less of each other, so they had very less communication. They got to see each other, even though they were sharing the same room, they got to see each other for a very limited time. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. So now, for some time, Kushan Singh's grandmother was the one who woke him up. Okay, even in the city house, she was the one for some who woke him up for some time. Okay, and she was the one who got him ready for school, just like how they were in the city, how she did in the city. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. So after Kushan Singh returned from school every day, so for some time she asked him what the teacher had taught him in the school. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, the Archimedes principle, the world being round, etc. This made her unhappy. So for some time, grandmother used to ask Khushwant Singh after he returned from school. She used to ask him what all things he learned from school that on that particular day. So he used to tell her certain English words. So this is a kind of education he used to get at the English school, the city school where he went, okay, and little things of Western science and learning. So these are the subjects that he used to learn: English language and science, Western science, of which grandmother knew nothing, okay, and she was very unhappy. Why? She could not help me with my lessons. See, grandmother could not help her grandson with his lessons. She could not assist him with his lessons. Okay, this made her very, very unhappy. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. She was disturbed. To her, music had lewd associations. It was a monopoly of harlots and beggars and not meant for gentlefolk. She said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. Now, Kushan Singh is telling that my grandmother was very much distressed. She was very much affected. Why? We'll see. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school. So she was worried. See, distressed. She was suffering from extreme anxiety, sorrow, or pain. So she was very sad and upset, and she was anxious also. Why? One thing is that she never believed in these subjects that her grandson is learning now in the English school, like science, Western science, or English language. And to add to her pain, there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. See, there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. So if we compare the education that he got in the village school, he was getting to learn Desi alphabets and prayers in the school, village school. So at that time, grandmother seemed to have very happy. Now, seemed to be very happy. And now in the city school, her grandson is getting to learn getting a different kind of education, which grandmother disapprove of. So that is why she becomes more and more upset. One day, I announced that announce here means to declare or say something out aloud to everybody. One day, I announced that they were being given music lessons. So one day, Kushan Singh, after he came back from the school, he announced or he told everyone in the family that he started learning music in school, music at school. She was very disturbed. Grandmother became very disturbed. She was very upset. To her, music had lewd association. Lewd means vulgar, very bad association, connection. So, according to grandmother, somebody who belonged to a noble family should not learn music. Now, and it was a monopoly. Monopoly means possession of harlots, prostitutes, and beggars, and not meant for gentle folk, people of noble birth, or people who are born into a good family. So now grandmother's belief was that music is the possession of some, or music is something that is meant only for harlots or beggars, and it is not suited for people who have a noble birth, or people who are born into a noble family, a good family. She said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. So grandmother didn't say anything against this, that Kushan Singh was learning music. She heard that, but she didn't respond. But she started keeping mum. She didn't talk to anybody after that. So Kushan Singh understood that grandmother was very upset. She rarely talked to me after that. See, so this is the change that happened in the grandmother. Okay, so she started uh, becoming silent. She didn't talk to Kushan Singh after learning that he is taking music lessons at school. When I went up to the university, I was given a room of my own. The common link of friendship was snapped. My grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel, spinning and reciting prayers. Now, after a few years, after Kushan Singh completed his schooling, now he started going to the university, and at this particular time his parents decided that he should be given a room of his own. And now the grandmother and the grandson were not sharing the common room as before. When I went up to the university, I was given a room of my own. The common link of friendship was snapped. So that particular line is very important. Now, the common link of friendship was snapped means it was broken. What is the common link of friendship between the grandmother and the grandson? The common link of friendship was a common room that they shared. Okay, till then, okay, this was broken. This particular link was broken when they were given two separate rooms. Who? The grandmother and the grandson. My grandmother accepted her seclusion. Seclusion means loneliness. So she was being lonely, but she accepted this loneliness with resignation. Resignation here means she accepted it without saying anything against it, without any objection, without placing any objection. So grandmother accepted her loneliness with resignation, without any objection, without saying anything against this particular idea. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. So all the time she was working on her spinning wheel after this particular thing happened, and she continued doing or working on the spinning wheel from morning to evening. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel, spinning and reciting prayers. Now, all from morning till evening, she was found sitting at her spinning wheel. That means she was working on her spinning wheel from morning to evening, from sunrise to sunset, and she was all the time reciting her prayers also. Only in the afternoon she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda, breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirrupings. Some came and perched on her legs, others on her shoulders, some even sat on her head. She smiled, but never shooed them away. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. Now, after their common link of friendship was broken, grandmother used to spend her time working on the spinning wheel and reciting her prayers because she was lonely all the time, and only during the afternoon she relaxed for a while. Okay, and at this particular time she used to feed the sparrows in the courtyard. We saw that earlier. While she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits, so she used to feed them bread, okay, and she used to break it up into little bits and throw the breadcrumbs to the birds. Hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating veritable bedlam of chirrupings. Now, chirping is a noise made by the birds. Okay, veritable means extreme, and bedlam here means it is a confusing noise that is made by the birds. So, extremely confusing chirping noise that is confused, sounding a bit confusing. Okay, so. Now, the sparrows used to get collected around her while she was breaking the bread into little bits, okay? And after this, she used to throw the breadcrumbs to the birds. And some came and perched on her legs. Some of the sparrows, they perched. Perch means to come and sit on something. So these birds, some of them, they used to sit or perch on grandmother's legs. Some others used to sit on her shoulders, and some even sat on her head. Okay, and grandmother was very happy wherever they sit. She was very happy, and she used to love them. And the sparrows were not also they were also not scared of grandmother, and that is why they were very friendly with grandmother. That is why they used to sit on her shoulders and her lap and her head even. She smiled but never shooed them away. To shoo somebody away means to make a shoo sound and scare somebody away. So grandmother didn't get irritated at that particular time when the birds were sitting on her body, but she was very happy and she smiled at that time, and she never scared these birds away. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. That part is important from the exam point of view. It used to be the happiest half hour. So, what is the happiest half hour of the day for grandmother? It was a time that she took for feeding sparrows in the courtyard in the afternoon. Okay, so this was the happiest half hour of the day for her. So, she used to almost uh, feed them for half an hour in the afternoon. So, this was the happiest time in her life at that time. When I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age, one could never tell. But my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave me at the railway station, but did not talk or show any emotion. Now, after completing his university education in his native land, Kushan Singh had decided to go abroad or to some other country. He wished to go to some other country. For what purpose? To pursue his higher education. Okay, so he wanted to complete his higher education in some other country, and he decided this, that he will do it. Okay, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. So when I made a decision like this, I knew very well that my grandmother would be sad, she would be upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age, one could never tell. Why is Kushan Singh making a statement like that? One could never tell because Kushan Singh is going to spend 5 years to pursue his higher education in the foreign country or foreign land, okay, and only after 5 years he could come back to his native place and see his grandmother again. So he was not sure that whether his grandmother would be alive when he comes back after 5 long years. That is why he is telling that one could, at her age, one could never tell. But my grandmother could see. So grandmother could predict, and she was sure that she would survive and she'll be there alive when her grandson returns home. My grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. So, as he made a decision like this, as he was going to leave his native land to pursue his higher education abroad, grandmother was not upset. She was not even sentimental. She didn't show any emotion. Instead, what did she do? She came to leave me at the railway station but did not talk or show any emotion. See, grandmother, she went to the railway station for what purpose? To see Kushan Singh off at the railway station as he was boarding the train. He was climbing on the train. Okay, so she did not talk or show any emotion. So grandmother was there to see Kushan Singh off at the railway station as he was going abroad, but she didn't show any emotion. She didn't become upset. She didn't show any sadness on her face. Okay, so she was there to see him off at the railway station. And instead, what did she do? Her lips moved in prayer, her mind was lost in prayer. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. Silently, she kissed my forehead, and when I left, I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. So, as Kushan Singh was boarding the train, going to board the train, what was grandmother's reaction? She didn't show any emotion. She was not emotional or sentimental, or she didn't show her sadness, any sadness on her face. Instead, she was praying, okay, and she was lost in prayers. She was praying all the time. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. So she was telling the prayers at the same time she was counting her prayers on her rosary. And silently she kissed my forehead. So as Kushan Singh left, uh, what did grandmother do? She kissed him on his forehead, okay? And when I left, I cherished. Cherished means to hold something dear or hold something close to our heart, some incident or some instance in our life that we hold very close to our heart. When I left the place, why? To pursue my higher studies, I cherished, I kept, or I held this moment very close to my heart. Why? Because I thought that this is the last sign of physical contact between us. Maybe grandmother will not be surviving when I come back from some other country where I am going to. And this might be perhaps the last sign of physical contact. I will not be able to even touch her after this. Cherish the moist imprint. Moist imprint means the wet mark which is made by his grandmother's lips on his forehead, and this might be the last sign of physical contact between us. This is what Kushan Singh's belief was. But that was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was met by her at the station. She did not look a day older. She still had no time for words, and while she clasped me in her arms, I could hear her reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom he fed longer and with frivolous rebukes. So earlier we saw that Kushan Singh believed after 5 years, after completing his university higher education outside the country, as he comes back, he will not be able to see his grandmother. But he was wrong. But that was not so. What I perceived was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was met by her at the station. So after 5 years, after completing his higher education abroad, when Kushan Singh came back home, that means when he came back to his home country, he was met by her at the railway station. See, so grandmother was there in the railway station and Khushwant Singh was wrong. She did not look a day older. Now, earlier there was a reference that is made by Khushwant Singh that for the past 20 years that I had known her, there was no change in her appearance. So, he is telling here also, he is telling that after I came back, after completing my higher education, when I came back, now, I could see that there is no change in her appearance whatsoever, and she didn't look even a day older. She still had no time for words. So, why no time for words? Because she prayed all the time. And while she clasped me in her arms, clasping means to grab tight, something very tightly with one's hand. So, she is holding Kushan Singh very tightly with her arms. Okay, because she was very happy that her grandson has returned from abroad. I could hear her reciting her prayers, and as she was clasping Kushan Singh very closely to her, at this time Kushan Singh could hear her reciting the prayer. So there was a reference like she used to recite her prayers in an inaudible way. Okay, so in a whispering manner. So at this time he could hear her reciting the prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer. So, after Kushan Singh had come back home, even then, the happiest moments of grandmother's life were the time which she took to feed the sparrows, and now she used to spend more time with them. Okay, she used to feed them longer for a longer period of time, and with frivolous rebuke means to scold somebody very lovingly. Okay, because you care for them just like how your parents scold you, okay, in a very loving manner. So grandmother cared for these birds, she cared for the fellow beings, and that is why she is scolding them in a very loving manner. In the evening, a change came over her. She did not pray. She collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum, and started to sing. For several hours, she thumped the sagging skins of the dilapidated drum and sang of the homecoming of warriors. We had to persuade her to stop to avoid overstraining. That was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. So now, after Kushan Singh had returned from another country after completing his higher education, now all on a sudden, in the evening, on that day itself, in the evening, a great change came over grandmother. And what was it? She did not pray. Grandmother was not spending her time praying, and instead she did something else. She did something very weird. And what is that? She collected the women of the neighborhood. So she invited the women, some of the women who are living in the neighborhood. She asked them to come to her house. Okay, and they came, and grandmother went ahead and got an old drum and started to sing. So grandmother invited the women of the neighborhood. They came to grandmother's house, and grandmother got an old worn out drum from somewhere and started to sing. Okay, and she's not singing prayers this time. Okay, she's not chanting prayers this time. Instead she sang of something else. We'll see what it is. For several hours she thumped. Thumped means to hit or strike something heavily. So here it is the drum that is she's thumping on. The sagging skins means the loose skin. That means this particular drum is very old, and it is in a worn out condition. Dilapidated means it is in a old worn out condition. And grandmother started thumping or beating on this drum, and this continued for several hours, just see. And uh, sang of the homecoming of warriors. Now, according to grandmother, who has come home? A warrior has come home, okay, after some great uh, thing that the person had done, the warrior, or maybe he had won a war and he's coming back home. So she's singing of the homecoming of warriors. And who is the warrior here? It is the author himself, okay, who had returned after completing his university education, higher education. And grandmother is very happy that her grandson has returned, and that is why now she is singing and beating on the drum. Okay, drum, and sang of the homecoming of warriors. We had to persuade her. Persuade means to ask somebody to stop doing something. Okay, now the people of the house, the family members, they had to persuade or ask or advise grandmother to stop doing this, because she's wasting so much of her energy. For several hours she's doing the same, so she might overstrain herself. So for this purpose, the family members started tried to stop her, okay, try to stop grandmother from doing this continuously, because she might overstrain herself and she might fall sick. Okay, that was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. So this is the first time that I could remember ever in grandmother's life that she didn't pray. So she spent her time in doing something else. So earlier we saw whatever she was doing, maybe she's getting him ready for school, or she might be feeding the sparrows. Every time she is reciting the prayers also. But at this particular moment, grandmother avoided praying. She didn't pray. This is the only time the author know that his grandmother didn't pray. The next morning she was taken ill. It was a mild fever, and the doctor told us that it would go. But my grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near. She said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life she had omitted to pray, she was not going to waste any more time talking to us. So, after straining for several hours in the previous evening, now the next day morning she was taken ill. Grandmother fell sick and she had fever, and the doctor was called, and the doctor told that it was a very mild fever, okay, and it would go just like that if she takes rest. Okay, now, but my grandmother thought differently. But the grandmother, Kushan Singh's grandmother, didn't agree to what the doctor told them. Okay, and what was her opinion? She told something else. What was it? She told us that her end was near. Okay, so she told the family members that she's going to die for sure, and that too very soon. She said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life. Now, the close of the last chapter of her life means she is going through the last few moments of her life and she is going to die soon. This was her opinion. And since I omitted to pray the last evening, okay, the last evening where she was singing the prayer, singing the songs, okay, and she said that since only a few hours left before the close of the last chapter of her life, she had omitted to pray. Omitted means she neglected to, she didn't care to pray. She was not going to waste any more time talking to us. See, so I just don't want to, this was the opinion of grandmother, I'm going to die soon, So I don't want to, anyway I have wasted so much of time last evening in doing the singing and all. So now I don't want to waste any more time uh, uh, okay, talking to you. And I just want to spend my time in praying, okay, or I want to spend my time in prayers. I don't want to waste my time talking to all of you, okay. So this is what grandmother told everyone. We protested, but she ignored our protests. She lay peacefully in bed, praying and telling her beads. Even before we could suspect, her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. A peaceful pallor spread on her face, and we knew that she was dead. Now, we protested. Protested means uh, to express objection. No, you should not do it. So, we protested. The family members, they told that grandmother, you should not do this. You should not overstrain. The doctor told that's a mild fever, and if you take rest, it would just go. But grandmother, she didn't hear them. Okay, he didn't pay attention to what the family members were saying. But she ignored our protest. She just ignored what the family members were saying. She lay peacefully in bed, praying and telling her beads. She continued lying on her bed and she continued praying and counting her prayers on the rosary that she had. So, even before we could suspect, her lids stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. So, at that instance, after some time, at that particular instance, her lips stopped moving. That means she had died, okay, and the rosary, it just fell off from her hands. A peaceful pallor. Pallor here means a pale appearance. Earlier also we saw that grandmother, because she is very old, she has a very pale, colorless kind of a face appearance. So now it is even pale, even more pale, okay, because she has passed away. A peaceful pallor spread on her face, and we knew that she was dead. So now, as the rosary fell off from her hands, and as the family members noticed that her face has become colorless, now the family members understood that grandmother is no more. She has died. We lifted her off the bed and, as is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. After a few hours of mourning, we left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. In the evening, we went to her room with a crude stretcher to take her to be cremated. The sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. We lifted her off the bed and, as is customary, customary means according to the customs or traditions, okay. So now the family is, after grandmother is dead, the family is planning to go forward with the funeral rites, okay. So they are arranging for the funeral of grandmother. So it is customary to lay the dead body on the floor, okay. So now they are doing it. As it is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. So red shroud here means a long piece of cloth which a dead person is wrapped for burial. So here it is red in color, the shroud, okay. So with the help of this shroud, now the family members are covering grandmother's dead body, and they are stiff wrapping the dead body in this particular red colored cloth or shroud, and they are laying her on the ground, on the floor, okay. After a few hours of mourning, so after expressing their sorrow over grandmother's death, now how can you express sorrow? Either you can be sad or you can be quiet for some time, okay. So after the family members and or some neighbors will be there, so they, after they mourned over grandmother's death, they expressed their sorrow We left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. So they are leaving the dead body of grandmother or the corpse of grandmother in her room. Okay, and it is placed on the floor. And everybody is going to make arrangements for grandmother's funeral. In the evening, we went to her room with a crude stretcher. Crude stretcher means it is roughly made. Maybe it was lying there somewhere in the house or outside the house. And they are carrying this crude stretcher. Why? To take her to be cremated. Okay, so in the evening, everybody is returning to grandmother's room with this roughly made stretcher. Why? To place the dead body on it and to take it out for funeral. The sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. So it is the evening sun. Okay, so just like this, it will be a bright colored light that will be getting at this time. Okay, in the evening. Okay, when it is almost twilight, and the light, okay, the evening sunlight has lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. Blaze means very bright, burning kind of light. Okay, so her room, that means the grandmother's room and veranda, is filled with a blaze of golden light. So it is an orangish golden light, very bright light, that is filling up grandmother's room and veranda. We stopped halfway in the courtyard, all over the veranda and in her room, right up to where she lay dead and stiff wrapped in the red shroud. Thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no chirruping. So now family members are carrying this crude stretcher. Why? To take grandmother's corpse to for the funeral. Okay, and they stopped halfway in the courtyard. They were moving towards grandmother's room, and they saw something, and they stopped all on a sudden. And why did they stop? What did they see? All over the veranda and in her room, right up to where she lay dead and stiff wrapped in the red shroud, thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. So now this is the sight that the family members are watching now. And what is the sight? Thousands and thousands of sparrows have collected around grandmother's corpse, grandmother's dead body, and all over the veranda there are so many sparrows sitting. So they were not at all chirping, they were not making any noise, as if it looked as if they are mourning the death of grandmother. They are being very sad and upset because grandmother is dead. Okay. We felt sorry for the birds, and my mother fetched some bread for them. She broke it into little crumbs, the way my grandmother used to, and threw it to them. The sparrows took no notice of the bread. When we carried my grandmother's corpse off, they flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweepers swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. So Kushan Singh and his family, they are watching this, okay, right in front of this their eyes, and they could not believe this, that it appeared to them as if the sparrows were being silent, or they are paying a tribute to grandmother, or they are mourning over the death of grandmother, and they were not at all making any sound. Okay, they are not at all making any noise. We felt sorry for the birds, and my mother fetched some bread for them. So the family members, they were feeling pity towards the birds, and Kushan Singh's mother took some bread for the birds. She broke it into little crumbs, the way my grandmother used to, and threw it to them. Now Kushan Singh's mother is breaking the bread into little bits, just like how the grandmother used to do, and she threw the breadcrumbs to these birds. Okay, maybe they are hungry. She thought that maybe they are hungry and they need some food, but this was not so. The sparrows took no notice of the bread. See, they didn't even pay attention to the breadcrumbs that are being thrown to them. Okay, they were not at all interested in the breadcrumbs. Okay, they sat still and quiet. When we carried my grandmother's corpse means body of a dead person, dead body. When we carried my grandmother's corpse off, they flew away quietly. So after some time, the family members, they took the corpse of grandmother outside in order to cremate her. Okay, and at this time, the birds also flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. So the next morning, when the sweeper came home in order to clean up everything, now she found out that there are these breadcrumbs which were thrown by Kushan Singh's mother the previous day. It was still lying there. That means they haven't eaten even a single tiny bit of the breadcrumb, and the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin next day. So it is very evident that the birds had come just to pay homage or just to mourn over the death of their dear beloved grandmother. So the grandmother in the story, she is a very strong, bold character, and she is a very religious person. She cared for the animals and the fellow beings, and she cared for her grandson also to a great deal. Okay, even after their relationship changed over the years, she was very happy that her grandson came back. Okay, after completing his formal education abroad, he came back. She was very happy, and after he came back immediately after that, she died also. So the grandmother's character is very impressive.